Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, a homeowner association built an illegal HOA community pool on my private property. They claim it's for HOA members only and I ended up suing them. Don't mess with my property without permission. Here is what happened. I don't want to go right out and say that I'm not social. I will admit that I enjoy having a large area of empty land in my name because it means I don't need to be surrounded by a bunch of people. I can associate with who I want to and ignore everybody else that annoys me. Speaking of people that annoy me, the HOA is at the top of that list with their constant badgering of me to join. I told them right where they could shove it and that next time they came to my door, I would call the police for trespassing. It was the only way I could make it clear to them that I did not want them to harass me. They did not even have the decency to try and hide why they wanted me to join so badly. They were after my land, which was the real thing, and being a member of the HOA would just make it easier for them to get some of my land. They considered it wasteful while most would consider it preservation of nature. The only thing I had was a fence that showed people the boundaries so I would not have to chase away people that did not know their land belonged to somebody. The HOA decided that it would be a smart idea to just ignore my fence and all previous conversations about the land we had. They waited for me to go on my yearly holiday trip to visit my family. A predictable thing they could take advantage of, and by the time I got back, I was met with something just horrible. They had destroyed my fence and took a decent chunk of my land to build what they were calling the HOA community pool. Open to all HOA members only, and the reason I know this is because of the many letters I got saying that I needed to join or I would not be able to use the pool. I knew where the HOA office was, so I went right down to try and see if they were drunk, high, or just stupid, or well, I guess a combination of all three. Me? Did you really think I was gonna come home, see this pool, and think, oh yeah, that's fine? HOA president? There was no other free land to build the pool. We've been saying for a long time, and it's what the people wanted. Me? See, it was not free land though. It was my land that I own and pay taxes on. You had no right to build on it. HOA president, listen, we know you might be a little apprehensive, but think of it this way. You still get your house and a nice bit of land around it. You won't even hear people at the pool, so it doesn't matter. Me, it matters to me. You cannot just take somebody's land and think they won't do anything about it. HOA president, well, what are you gonna do about it then, huh? Pick up the pool and move it off your property? He laughs, but I don't want to give away what my next step is. I talked to a lawyer and found that they were in violation of so many things it was not even funny. Trespassing, land encroachment, building without a valid permit, destruction of property, etc, etc. And that was only what he could think of off the top of his head. We were gonna take them to court and screw them over for every single penny they had. They might even have ended up facing jail time from some of these offenses. Again, since I did not tell them that we had the jump and I can promise when the paperwork for the lawsuit got to them, they were not laughing anymore. One person actually tried to approach me and either ask me or threaten me to drop the case. It was hard to tell because this guy was about as threatening as a preschool TV cartoon. I was going through with this and they were not going to be able to stop me. I guess they had a good lawyer that told them how much trouble they would get in if this thing went in front of a judge. They wanted to meet outside of court and try to come to an agreement that we would all be fine with. I was not sure because I knew I could win in court, but the problem was it could take years of fighting. Settling was always easier, according to my lawyer. In the meeting, the lawyers were going back and forth about what kind of money we wanted from the HOA to make the whole thing kind of go away. We were able to get a huge sum of money from them for destroying the property, and then it came to one last detail that nobody was sure about: the pool itself. Like, they joked before that you cannot just pick it up and move it. I learned during all of this that despite it being built on my property with no legality, they still technically owned it. I could demand that they pay to dismantle the entire thing and restore my land to how it was before. They were claiming after the settlement money and how much it was to build it, they had nothing left. Even if I took them further to court, I could win money, but if they didn't have it, I would be out of luck. I spent a few minutes alone with my lawyer, where I asked about another idea. I wanted the rights to the pool signed over to me so they could have no claim to it. I would forego making them pay and destroy it in exchange for that full ownership of the pool. When we brought back that offer, the HOA president did not want to agree to those terms. I guess they were still hoping that they could keep their pool, but I was not gonna let them have anything. Eventually, their lawyer convinced them it was better than court and possibly jail time. I now had a nice amount of money and owned a pool. Also, I don't like to end things quietly, which is why I wanted that very specific agreement with them. I wanted to make them see constantly how they messed up and never want to do it again. What I did was I filed for that part of my property to become commercial instead of residential. It was approved and now I had a pool that I owned and could legally run. Sure, I still needed to do some work, hire lifeguards, make sure I passed inspection, etc. I had more than enough money to make all of that happen with no current overhead. I was not just doing what they were and making some HOA pool where members could come. This was private, and if people wanted to get into a pool, they now had to pay for it. It stays warm a good amount of time where I am, so I was able to have the pool open for 4 months out of the year. Between daily entry and season passes, I was making a killing. Meanwhile, on the other side of the things, the HOA was broke, and despite charges not being pressed, they were under a new investigation. I had no clue what that was for, but it was enough to get them shut down for good. The HOA was finally gone, and I was thrilled to hear it. I guess I should thank them in a way for making me a ton of money, but I won't because they were just scumbags. And yeah, Ripe Stars, to be honest, I would not really mind if the HOA built a free pool on my property and then effed off. I guess that was a lucky turn of events for OP, but props to him for turning this terrible situation into a good one. Either way, if you haven't already, I would very much appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel, like the video, and maybe even post a comment, because that would help me tremendously. And by the way, I will give at least 1 minute of kitten cuddles to my cat for every new subscriber I get. Anyway, the next one is another revenge story. This one is not as wild as some I see here, but I figured some of you guys would appreciate the type of parent I have and finally getting a solid moment of triumph. So my mom is a piece of work and I recently had to move back into her house as an adult. And she has been non-stop exceptionally selfish and entitled, but that's cool, I can go with the flow, I hate it and it wears on me, but what you gonna do, right? I usually keep my cool and hold my tongue because I don't like rocking the boat, but every single time she says something, I always picture what I want to say in the moment. I mean, like everyone else does, right? Well, today I finally had enough. We are at the store and she picks out a pack of Palm Bays for herself while I'm there just grabbing a snack for later. I casually ask what flavor she got to start a conversation. She tells me and I go, "Oh nice, could I try a sip when you open them?" I would love to try it to see if I liked it. You would think I told her that I was gonna kick her dog. She clutched them to her chest, makes a disgusted scoff at me, and goes, "These are mine, get your own." So I shrug and say, "Okay," and head across the street to get some mossa sticks while I wait for her to finish. We get in the car, I open my takeout box, and without her taking her eyes off the road, my mom just extends her hand. Silently, doesn't ask, just holds her hand out to me. I casually and purposely eat my first mozzarella stick and I look at her and go, "Yes?" And she scoffs again, as if I just asked the dumbest question in the world and goes, "Can I have one?" So I smile with the biggest crab-eating grin, theoretically and deliberately dip it in the sauce and go, "These are mine, get your own." Granted, she did follow up with making some incredulous noises and said, "Wow, I cannot believe you actually thought I wouldn't give you a sip of my drink. Ha!" But I don't care, despite her backpedaling like an Olympic champion, I just kept grinning and did in fact eat all of them right there in the car without sharing a single one, because they were mine. And the next one is another revenge story. And by the way guys, let me know in the comments what you think about these more light-hearted petty revenge stories. Do you prefer the heavy-hitting ones or do you also like petty revenge? I would appreciate your feedback. So this happened earlier tonight. I was out driving and was in the #1 lane. For most that don't know, this is the innermost lane, the leftmost lane in the US, or the one closest to the center. On the highway and freeway, this is known as the fast lane, but I was on a side street. Well, the light up ahead had just turned red, so I was coming to a stop. There were about 7 to 10 cars in front of me. The point where I stopped was right where the dual left-hand turn lanes started. But since this was a divided road by a concrete center divider, there was no room for cars to pass me on the left to get into the turn lane. For some reason, the dumbass lady behind me thought there was. So she started honking. Even if I moved up to place my bumper against the bumper of the car in front of me, there was still not enough room for her to pass me. We made eye contact in my mirror, I pointed to the car in front of me and shook my head. She decided that this meant that I had room in front of me and continued to beep the horn. I sat there shaking my head, and I even looked at the people in the car next to me, and they were laughing and shaking their heads too. She was yelling at this point, and now I enjoy screwing with people, especially when driving, and even more so when they deserve it. And well, she was really deserving. So when the signal turned green for my lane to move, the left turn signal was red, I just sat there. I started to stretch my neck, yawned a couple of times, rubbed the back of my neck, rubbed my eyes, scratched my nose, and adjusted my rear view mirror. That whole time, all of the cars had pulled away, and there was a lot of space in front of me. This lady was going nuts. She just laid on the horn, no beeping, just one long blast. She had rolled down her windows and was screaming at the top of her lungs. I rolled forward about a foot, still not enough room for her to pass. Then I put on my left turn signal and sat there for a few more seconds. She had let off the horn when I moved forward, but proceeded to lay on it again. I made eye contact with her again in my driver's side mirror, and she was going nuts. I smiled at her and blew her a kiss and then drove away. She tried to speed up next to me to get side by side, but my car was faster. I will now go into this weekend knowing how much I ruined that entitled Karen's day. It will be a great weekend. Update to add, for those of you wondering, the left turn light was red, so she had nowhere to go. Oncoming traffic was already moving through the intersection, so she couldn't run through it. There was only one car behind her, and they figured it out and went around. Also, this was in Los Angeles, where traffic sucks and people suck even more. There's no such thing as a passing lane here either. This was a divided 8-lane main road going through LA, and to explain it more, there was nowhere I could go when I stopped. I was not intentionally blocking her until after the light turned green. It was probably only for a few seconds, and since her light was still red, it didn't change anything. I also do understand the emergency thing. If she was going to the hospital, then she should have made a right at that intersection and not a left. Having worked in LE for many years, I used to follow ambulances when I worked traffic to prevent a-holes, either entitled or oblivious, from blocking them. And the next one is a revenge story on an ex. My ex-husband Brian was and is a toxic, controlling narcissist. Classic case. Our divorce was very bitter, but I tried to be fair, splitting custody and giving him decision-making authority under the assumption that he would be a better father than he was a husband. Things went well for about a year. I got a new boyfriend who was great to both me and my kids and wanted to be involved in their life. When he found out that my new boyfriend Tom is gonna be attending my kids' fall festival at school, he went off the deep end. He abruptly decided he was not gonna watch the kids while I worked anymore. He also refused to let my friends or family watch the kids and said he had to meet them first, but then would refuse to do so and claimed he would sue me for going against the custody agreement. Basically, since he had decision-making authority, and if I got a babysitter, he wouldn't approve. I lost 2 days at work scrambling to find any place available, which was difficult because of the school's location they attend. He began asking the kids to call him every night, which is fine, but if we were eating or busy doing something and I told him it would have to be later when they call, he would rage and threaten to sue me. He began asking me at all times where I was with the kids. One day I went into work for 3 hours to clean up some things I missed due to a storm. I left the kids with Tom since waking them up at 4:30 a.m. seemed needless. When Brian found out, he raged and threatened to sue me. He threatened to apply for child support even though we split custody. He raged about every little thing. He did not bring the kids to the Christmas school play because he knew Tom would be there. He fought me over medical appointments for the kids and refused to pay his share because he did not agree to the appointment and of course would sue me. He would not let me have the kids during this time, even to let them attend birthday parties or sleepovers with friends or family, something we had been doing for each other with no issue. This went on for about 2 months before I snapped. I hate when parents are willing to hurt their kids over their own egos. He kept threatening to take me to court and I was fed up with the empty threat. So first I wanted to make sure he couldn't afford to fight me in court. Brian was on food stamps and I knew it was only because he was claiming to pay his ex-wife rent. She still owns half the house and he still owed her half the value. So I sent his ex-wife a message asking her if she was getting rent from him and she said no. I sent that letter to DCF and they closed his food stamp card and sued him for fraud. Then his ex-wife turned around and sued him for her value of the house since he was claiming to have been paying her all along. Then I sued him to modify the custody agreement and take out all the things that he was using to try and harass me. I had screenshots of every nasty thing he sent me. I had a letter typed by his lawyer stating that he was looking for another job since I was not paying him and that's why he couldn't watch the kids. So basically, if he tried to get child support, I could prove he was capable of finding more income. I had medical records and receipts showing I had paid for everything for the last year for the kids' health needs. I had records of things he said to the kids about me. I had pictures of them looking filthy when picking them up from his house. I had receipts of everything I had spent on the kids for the past year. He folded pretty quickly, cannot harass me anymore, and is still paying off his first ex-wife. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. Trespass and park in a farmer's driveway without permission. You will get a truckload of manure on top of your convertible. My father had always been a polite and kind-hearted man, but he is as sharp as a tack and you should watch out for him. I could never get away with anything when I was a teenager. One of my favorite stories to tell about him is the time that he got his ultimate revenge on this douche lawyer from the city. It started with our hometown forming a public national park next to our property. I will admit that I love the park and walk there frequently. It helped raise our property value a ton as well. Dad and I had always used it as our form of bonding and therapy before it was an actual park and would often go fishing at the large lake that exists a few miles north of the park. Our very long driveway runs about 10 or 12 yards in front of the park entrance. A few feet on the other side of the driveway is a ravine and then our fields. The city carved out a little gravel parking area, maybe 100 yards from the entrance. For most people, this is enough and you know, they are there to exercise, so what is wrong with walking a little further to get to the entrance? Well, one day, some fancy pants sporty convertible started showing up parked in our driveway. I guess to be exact, half of it was. But still, Dad could not get his tractor around it one day because it would roll into the ravine. It ended up costing him almost an entire day's work, and when it comes to farming, that is a big frickin' deal. Dad lingered near the vehicle for over 2 hours waiting for the man to come back. He was really polite about it. I remember being about 15 and sitting in the tractor watching and listening to the conversation.
I can park wherever I want,
he said with an arrogant tone. Let's call this guy Jerk.
Now I'm going to need you to get away from my car. I'm sure it's worth more than your house.
He climbed into his convertible over the door like an a-hole, trying to look cool, and started it up, putting on his sunglasses and peeled out so fast it sent gravel flying and hitting Dad and the tractor. I could see Dad fighting the urge to get upset, readjusting his head calmly after being pelted by rocks. My father was not used to being blatantly disrespected by men like that. In our small town, people are generally kind and good to each other, especially the farmers. However, not this guy. He is not from here, we can tell. Turns out we were right. The car was back the following week. After discreetly inspecting the license plate, which was hotshot, I was able to see what county the vehicle was registered in, which was a bigger city not too far outside of our town. When the car was parked in our driveway a second time in 1 week, Dad was pretty pissed. He really needed to accomplish his work today or he would end up behind for the first time ever in his farming career. The jerk seemed to take hours to return to his car that day. When he finally did get there, he seemed absolutely irritated that we were waiting for him.
What are you doing by my car again?
He ran up to it and started inspecting the paint job for any marks or dents. Sir, I need you to please stop parking in my driveway. I need to get past you and when you park here I cannot, said my father, but the jerk cut him off.
I don't care what you say, I can park here if I want to.
He opens the door and gets into the car the normal way this time.
Now please, would you kindly F off and leave me alone about it before I sue you?
He peeled out again, throwing rocks onto us and the tractor. Father was red in the face and shaking. Let's get back to work. He just wanted to carry on and forget about it. The summer ended and I was going back to school, so I could not help Dad with farm work anymore. One day when I was on the bus on the way home, I looked behind us to see Jerk in his sports car with a very pretty woman. She was beautiful with long blonde hair that whipped around as the wind from the convertible caught it. She was laughing as the the douche man must have made terrible jokes, it was obvious that they were headed towards the park/my house. When I got off the bus, he was pulling up behind me, skipping the usual parking spaces and headed down our driveway. I stood in his way and refused to move, making him stop the car.
Get out of the way, you little jerk!
He yelled, earning him a strange look from his female passenger. I just stood there staring at him. He threw his car in park and got out. As he walked up to me aggressively, I was not quite sure what he was going to do. He got close to my face, as close as he could because he was shorter than me, even at 15 years old.
I already told your dad that I would sue him if you guys kept this up. In case you couldn't tell, I'm a pretty successful lawyer, and it would not be anything for me to take your old man to court. And now move.
He gets back into his car and we stare each other down for another 30 seconds or so before I decide to head back to the house. So, here's some hotshot lawyer, huh? I started looking into this. I hop on the internet. Yeah, I'm not that old. The internet and Facebook were a pretty established thing when I was 15, and start looking at lawyers in the city where he is from. It took a while and I had to sacrifice some important homework time, but I managed to pull it off. His name was Martin Hotshot Thompson, and I suppose he was a little bit of a big deal as far as lawyers are concerned in a somewhat big city. Either way, he is still a douchebag. Something else I discovered was that the pretty blonde woman he was with today was not his wife. Ha! I think this is some important info to keep in my back pocket. Another day or two passes and Martin Hotshot Thompson shows up again in our driveway. He is alone this time though. Right before Jerk showed up, we had a big truck show up to pick up a bunch of cow crap. Yeah, we also have cows on top of crops. A few times a year, Dad made a pretty good profit off of cow poop since people like to use it for fertilizer. The problem that comes from Jerk showing up after the truck came is that this truck full of poop cannot get around his pretty little sports car now. The driver walked to the back of the house to tell us that he could not get past a vehicle parked on the side of the driveway. Dad had known this guy for a few years now, and I would say they are kind of friends. He tells his buddies about the BS that Hotshot had put him through, and he chuckles and asks Dad if he is interested in getting some payback. Dad and the driver head back down the gravel driveway and put their revenge plan in motion. The truck was pretty full of manure, maybe a little too much, so we shook quite a bit of the overflow on top of the convertible. Even with how little the amount appeared coming out of the truck, once it was in the car, it seemed to fill it up in a hurry. We all laughed till our sides hurt and waited for the man to return to his vehicle. The amount of drama that followed was truly hilarious. Hotshot's face was well worth all of it too. His eyes nearly bugged out of his head when he saw all the cow poop in his car. The fact that we are all sitting there laughing was even better. He fumed and screamed a bunch of hardly understandable curse words. When he opened the car door, tons of manure fell out onto his nice running shoes. Dad was nearly crying with laughter, casually pulled an old gardening trowel out of his back pocket and handed it to him. Here, you can borrow a shovel. The three of us howled with laughter again, and Jerk smacked the trowel onto the ground. He took a moment to hand scoop mounds of it out of the driver's seat so he could peel out like usual. We did not hear from Jerk until about a week later when he showed up again. This time Dad was not home and the a-hole was waiting in the driveway when I got off the bus. He had a yellow folder of papers. He handed me the folder saying that these were for my father, that he was suing us for dumping all that poop onto his car. I see that you got it cleaned up just fine, I said, clearly making an observation.
What do you care? Make sure your dad gets though.
I cut him off rudely like he did with my dad. I'm not giving him anything. You wanna know why? I saw you with that pretty blonde lady, but I figured out that's not your wife. He was clearly surprised.
How do you know?
He started saying, his eyes big with shock. I'm a kid with internet access. It's not that hard to figure out when you have a Facebook, stupid. I handed him his folder of papers back and turned on my heel and walked up the driveway towards my house. Proud as hell of myself, to be honest. Hotshot got in his sports car and drove away that day, never coming back. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.